When I first gave my son access to my bank account, it wasn't out of obligation, it was out of love. He had just gotten married, trying to start his new life, and I wanted him to feel supported. It's just for emergencies. Okay, I had said, handing him the signed papers at the kitchen table. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "Of course, Mom, you can trust me." And I did, maybe too much. The house was quiet that evening. I sat by the window, knitting while thinking about how fast he'd grown from the little boy who once begged me for ice cream to the man now calling another woman his family. I felt proud, but also strangely lonely. That's the part no one warns you about, that when your children grow up, they don't just leave home, they leave the version of you that raised them behind. He'd always been my reason to keep going. After his father passed, I worked 2 jobs to make sure he never went without. I missed meals, skipped new clothes, and stayed up late just to finish extra shifts. But seeing him succeed made it all worth it. That night, when he called me the best mom in the world, I believed him. As I looked at the small photograph on the shelf, him in his graduation gown, smiling wide, holding my hand, I felt a warmth in my chest. I thought I'd done everything right. I thought trust, once earned, stayed forever. I didn't know that the same hands I raised with love would one day empty everything I had left. It was a quiet Sunday morning when everything changed. The air was still, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the smell of fresh tea filling the room. I sat at my small wooden desk, ready to pay a few bills online, something I'd done countless times before. I typed in my login details, humming softly to myself, but the moment the page loaded, my heart dropped. The number on the screen didn't make sense. I blinked, refreshed the page, then did it again. 0. My savings account completely empty. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. Banks make errors, systems glitch. But then I saw the transactions, one after another, all recent: airline tickets, hotel bookings, shopping, restaurant charges. My eyes scanned faster and faster until I saw the name on the receipts. His name, my son. My hands started trembling. I clicked on the travel details: a flight to the Maldives, first-class seats, luxury resort. I could barely breathe. The money I had spent my whole life saving for retirement, for emergencies, for peace, was gone. All of it. I grabbed my phone and called him immediately. It rang and rang, but he didn't pick up. The second time, it went straight to voicemail. By the third try, my stomach twisted with something worse than anger, disbelief. Then, a notification popped up on my screen. His wife had posted a picture, the 2 of them, smiling in sunglasses, drinks in hand, standing beside turquoise water. Her mother was there too, posing proudly beside them. The caption read, "Finally, the family vacation we deserve." My breath caught. Family. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. I wasn't in it. I wasn't even mentioned. All I could think was, how could my own son steal from me to give happiness to someone else's mother? That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt heavier than ever, too quiet, too cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone, staring at the photos they'd posted again and again. My son's smile looked genuine, carefree even. His wife wore a bright sundress, her arm wrapped around him, and beside them, her mother looked as if she belonged there, as if she were the one who had raised him, not me. I zoomed in on his face, searching for some trace of guilt, some sign that he knew what he had done. But there was nothing, just happiness. That broke me more than the missing money ever could. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that he was out there enjoying life while I sat alone, wondering when my love had stopped meaning anything. The phone buzzed suddenly, a message from him. My heart jumped. "Mom, I'll call you later. We're kind of busy. Don't worry about anything. Don't worry." My savings were gone, and he was on a tropical island, sipping cocktails with his in-laws. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to demand an answer, but all I could do was sit there, the weight of silence pressing down on me. I thought about the years I'd spent working double shifts, the nights I'd walked home under the rain just to make sure he had everything he needed. I remembered his little voice once saying, "One day, I'll take care of you, Mom." I had believed him, every word. Now, as I sat alone in that dimly lit room, staring at the smiling faces on my screen, one truth settled deep in my chest. I had raised a son who no longer saw me as his mother. To him, I had become just a resource, a wallet, a forgotten chapter in his story of success and comfort. The next morning, I went straight to the bank, still clinging to a small hope that there had been some mistake. The teller, a young man with kind eyes, listened patiently as I explained everything: how my son had access to my account for emergencies, how suddenly every penny had vanished. He typed for a while, his fingers clicking softly on the keyboard, then looked up with a sympathetic expression that told me the truth before he even spoke. "Ma'am," he said gently, "the transfers were all authorized. The account used his linked access. I'm afraid there's nothing we can reverse without his consent." My throat tightened. "You mean, he can just take it all, just like that?" He hesitated before nodding. "Legally, yes. It was a shared access. I'm really sorry." I walked out of the bank in a daze. The city sounds around me, car horns, chatter, the hum of life, felt distant, muffled. Everything I had worked for, gone with a few clicks. I sat on a bench outside, clutching my bag like it still held something precious. The tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, just soft, helpless ones that soaked into the sleeves of my old cardigan. As I wiped my eyes, a memory surfaced: me teaching him how to save. He must have been 12, sitting beside me as I showed him how every coin counted. "You never take what's not yours," I had told him. "Money is trust." Now, I realized how cruelly ironic those words had become. He hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen that trust. And as I sat there, watching people rush past, a quiet voice inside me whispered something new. "He may have taken my savings, but he hasn't taken my power." It was faint then, just a flicker, but it was the first spark of something that would soon grow, the beginning of my revenge. Days passed, but the ache didn't fade. It deepened. Every time I opened my phone, I was met with more photos of their perfect vacation. My son and his wife laughing over dinner by the ocean, his arm around her mother while they toasted with wine glasses. Each picture felt like another slap, another reminder that I'd been replaced. But pain has a strange way of clearing the fog. One evening, as I sat in the dim glow of my living room lamp, a calmness settled over me, not peace, but purpose. I realized that waiting for an apology was useless. He had made his choice, and now I needed to make mine. I went to the small drawer where I kept old papers, house deeds, tax forms, and the joint account documents. I spread them out on the table, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from resolve. He might have drained my money, but he had also left behind a trail of digital arrogance. He thought I was too weak, too old, too emotional to fight back. That was his mistake. I spent the night going through everything, making notes, calculating what was left: my house, a small pension, a few personal investments he didn't know about. I realized that even though he'd taken $70,000, I still had something he could never steal: control over my future. As the clock struck midnight, I closed the folder and took a deep breath. My hands were steady now. The sadness was still there, yes, but beneath it burned a quiet determination. He had used my love against me, but I would turn that pain into power. When I finally went to bed, I didn't cry. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly because I knew what I had to do next. A week later, they returned from their vacation. I heard the sound of their car pull up in front of my house, laughter, the slam of a trunk, the jingle of keys. I stood by the window, watching quietly as they unloaded glossy suitcases and duty-free bags. They looked happy, sunburned, glowing with the kind of joy money buys. My money. When my son finally came inside, he acted as though nothing had happened. "Hey, Mom," he said casually, dropping his keys on the table. "You look tired. Have you been okay?" For a moment, I just looked at him, at the same boy I once carried through sleepless nights. Now, a grown man who could smile after emptying my life savings. My voice came out calm, too calm. "You didn't call." "All right," he shrugged, glancing at his phone. "Yeah, the Wi-Fi was bad, but the trip was great. You should have seen the resort, Mom. It was incredible." His wife walked in behind him, wearing designer sunglasses indoors, holding a bag that probably cost more than my month's groceries. "We brought you something," she said, handing me a tiny keychain shaped like a seashell. A little souvenir. I stared at it, a cheap trinket bought with my stolen money, and something inside me went cold. I placed it gently on the table. "How thoughtful," I said softly. "Tell me, did your mother enjoy the trip?" She smiled proudly. "Oh, she loved it. She said it was the best vacation of her life." My son nodded, completely oblivious to the storm building behind my calm expression. "Yeah, Mom, it was worth every penny." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure it was." Then I turned and walked to my room, closing the door quietly behind me. He didn't notice the tremor in my hand or the tears I refused to let fall, because in that moment, one thing became clear: they had no idea what I was about to do. That night, I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of my phone screen. I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, graduations, holidays, all those moments when I thought we were happy. In every picture, I was smiling beside my son, my arm around him, proud and full of love. Now, looking at those same images, I realized I had been blind. Love had made me blind. I opened my laptop and began searching. Lawyers, financial advisors, property listings one by one. I went through everything I could find. If he could take what I had built, then I could rebuild without him. My life wasn't over just because he decided to erase me from his. But revenge wasn't going to be loud or messy. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to teach him. So, I started planning quietly. I met with a lawyer 2 days later and explained everything. He listened carefully, then helped me transfer the ownership of my house and assets into a private trust, one that excluded my son entirely. From that day on, he would never have access to a single thing that was mine again. After that, I made one final decision to cut contact. No angry words, no scenes, no shouting, just silence. I blocked his number, stopped answering messages, and began withdrawing from the life that revolved around him. At first, it felt empty, lonely, but soon, that emptiness began to feel like space I could finally breathe in. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call, or approval, or affection that came with conditions. As I closed my laptop that night, I whispered to myself, "You took my money, but you won't take my peace." And for the first time since it all began, I meant it. Weeks went by in silence. My phone no longer lit up with his messages, and the house, though quiet, began to feel peaceful again. I started waking up early, opening the curtains, and letting the morning sun spill across the kitchen table, a table that once felt empty, now slowly becoming mine again. I began cooking small meals just for myself, taking walks in the park, even laughing with the neighbors I'd ignored for years while worrying about everyone else. One afternoon, as I walked past a community board, a flyer caught my eye: Women's Life After 50 Financial Independence Workshop. For a moment, I hesitated, but something deep inside nudged me forward. I tore the flyer off and went the next day. The room was filled with women like me, some divorced, some widowed, others betrayed by their own families. As I listened to their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. Each of us had been broken in some way, but sitting there, I saw something powerful. We were all still standing. By the end of the session, I signed up for a small investment class and volunteered to help with their next event. In the evenings, I began selling a few handmade crafts online, something I used to love but had abandoned long ago. The first time I sold a piece, it wasn't about the money, it was about the feeling that I was capable, that I could rebuild, piece by piece, without anyone's help. Every day that passed, the image of my son laughing on that beach hurt a little less. In its place grew something stronger. I no longer needed an apology, or even an explanation. The best revenge wasn't punishment, it was progress, and I was finally moving forward. One rainy evening, months later, I heard a knock on the door. For a moment, I hesitated. Hardly anyone visited anymore. When I opened it, there he was. My son. His hair was messy, his clothes damp, and the confidence that once filled his eyes was gone. He looked smaller somehow, lost. "Mom," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word, watching him shuffle into the house he hadn't set foot in 4 months. He looked around slowly, as if seeing it for the first time, the furniture rearranged, the plants on the windowsill, the faint scent of candles instead of the old smell of cooking. "You've changed things," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I had to." He sat down at the table, his hands clasped together. "Mom, I messed up. Things didn't go as planned. We had some money problems. The trip, the bills, it all caught up. I didn't mean for it to go this far." His voice cracked at the end. "I thought I'd pay you back. I really did." I watched him carefully. There was guilt in his tone, maybe even regret, but I could also see the fear of losing what he thought he still had control. I took a deep breath, sat across from him, and said quietly, "You didn't just take my money, son, you took my trust. And that's something you can't buy back." He looked down, his eyes glistening. "I know. I don't know how to fix it." For a long moment, I said nothing. The silence between us was heavy, filled with years of love, disappointment, and pain. Finally, I stood and poured him a cup of tea, placing it in front of him the way I used to when he was a child. "You can start," I said gently, "by fixing yourself. He nodded, his shoulders shaking, tears falling freely now. And though part of me still ached for the boy I'd raised, I knew one thing for certain. This time, I wouldn't save him. After that night, he left quietly, no promises, no excuses, just a silent goodbye at the door. As I watched him walk away under the dim streetlight, I didn't feel the rage I once had. Instead, there was a calm, bittersweet peace. I knew that chapter of my life, the one where I lived for him, was over. And for the first time, I was okay with that. Days turned into weeks, and my life slowly found its rhythm again. I kept busy with the small business I'd built, surrounded myself with people who treated me with kindness, and learned to enjoy my own company. The laughter in my house now came from me, not from old memories or forced smiles, but from a woman rediscovering herself. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch sipping tea, a breeze brushed through the trees, carrying the faint scent of rain. I looked out at the garden, bright, full, alive, and realized how much it mirrored my own journey. Things had withered, yes, but they had also grown again, stronger than before. Sometimes, I still thought of my son. I wondered if he ever truly understood what he had done. But then I'd remind myself, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from what once broke you. I reached for my journal, the one I'd started after losing everything, and wrote the words that had been sitting in my heart for months. He took my money, but I gained my freedom. He broke my trust, but I found my strength. And in losing him, I finally found myself, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson. I smiled, not because my story was perfect, but because it was mine again.